This is I Love Black People Radio on H.U.R Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are.
All right, welcome again to I Love Black People, and this is a great way to start the year off with a wonderful brother that's shown a lot of courage, a lot of concern for our people by his body of work, and I would do him not the proper justice if I didn't allow him to introduce himself, but your brother, my brother, good brother, Gregg Marcel Dixon, candidate and future congressman, brother Dixon. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, look, I want to make sure we get into all the details of what you're doing right now. But if we could, just kind of give the audience some background of who Brother Gregg Marcel Dixon is and how did we get to this space where you've accepted the challenge to continue to change this world that needs so many changes made.
Well, my name is Gregg Marcel Dixon, but you can just call me Marcel. That's my middle name, and that's the name to which I prefer for people to refer to me. And I am Georgia born in Savannah, Georgia, but I was raised right across the bridge in South Carolina, a small town named Ridgeland, South Carolina. I'm sure no one's probably ever heard of it unless people drive up and down I-95 from the north down to Florida and they pass through. They probably never heard of my town, but it's right off I-95. It's coastal, it's very swampy, it's extremely impoverished materially speaking, but very rich in culture. And I'm running on a reparations platform for Black Americans who are descendants of American slaves. I like to refer to them as freedmen because we are the people who were referred to as freedmen when Congress passed the Freedmen's Bureau Acts, Act 1 and Act 2. I'm running on a platform of reparations for that particular ethnic group, my ethnic group, against James Clyburn to replace him as the representative for South Carolina Congressional District 6.
Awesome. And you really were breaking down some real I get good pieces of information. I think so many of us, and I guess we're very clear that race is a fiction. But when you start talking about experience and ethnicity, you're really breaking down something that allows us to focus what these reparations. People hear about reparations and actually who deserves these reparations and how that's defined. And even what you just said about the freedmen, break some more of that down and draw that connection if you would. I don't want to get into the details, but I think when people like yourself bring these topics up, I pray the folks that are listening go and take that as a sample to go explore that. Like it seems like even the points you just made about the swamps, like there's so much that when you talk, you kind of like sample so many bits and pieces of our culture. What more would you like to kind of say about freedmen and why you make a very clear distinction of who is deserved these reparations that we refer to?
Well, what people have to understand is that we as Black Americans, we are our own Black ethnic group, okay? We know when we go to the continent of Africa, that the continent of Africa, the majority of people there, of the nearly 2 billion people on that continent, are racially speaking Black. And I know you said that race is a fiction, is a social construct, but people have to understand, so is money. Really, what is a dollar bill besides a sheet of paper to which we socially accept as representing a certain value? So even though something is a social construct, it can, and in our experience as Black people in America, definitely has had real impact on our lives. So you got the Yoruba, you got the Fulani, you got the Hausa, you got the Igbo. Well, we as Black Americans, we are freedmen. Now, people like to say, well, we've been called many things. Socially, we've been called many things. We were called colored. We've been called Black American, Negro, African American. Some just say Black American. But congressionally speaking, on the books of Congress, we have been referred to as freemen. That's why we had the Freedmen Bureau only for us, those who are descendants of the 4 million people who were emancipated after slavery. We have freedmen cemeteries right now who are only the bodies of the people who are the descendants of those who were emancipated from slavery are in those graves. We had the Freedmen Hospital, which I understand one in DC was there the longest, which was only for those of us who were descendants of those who were emancipated from slavery. Okay, we had the Freedmen's Bank. The first Freedmen's Bank in America was located down here in Beaufort, South Carolina. My ancestors had an account with that bank. It was only for those of us who were the descendants of those who were emancipated from slavery or were the emancipated slaves themselves. So freeman is our ethnicity. The same way people say Jamaican, Panamanian, Cuban, and they all could be Black, but that's their specific nationality / ethnicity. Freedmen is ours. Congressional. What we call ourselves socially, that's besides the point. There's even a new term I see floating around called sola or solon, referencing us as having soul, because people think of Black Americans, think of us as people having soul. And of course we do. Everything we do is soulful. But congressionally speaking, we are freedmen. So that's why I like to use that term.
Awesome. And then as you talk about, just the definition and even the ability to define ourselves and actually have conversations about what is owed from this government, what do you see as a candidate, for Congress? How do you see that issue, and what can we do to get more of those potential voters and potential supporters to, because this is a big deal. Like what you're doing, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, that has to be done. And, I know you got some big shoulders, but what can our people do to be supportive of this? It's 30 years have been not wasted, have gone by on a study bill that we never needed a study for. What can people do to literally change the people in the halls of Congress that made these terrible bills in the first place and have basically, again, I'm kind of ad-libbing, so I'm not trying to get you to agree with things. I'm clear 30 years is not how long it takes to get this done. So again, what do you see as you're as a candidate? What can we do to help you in this Herculean task?
Well, first of all, let me reference something you said about 30 years. The reason I'm running, that number 30 is a powerful number because my district here in South Carolina District 6, has been represented by the same congressman, James Clyburn, for 30 years. And within those 30 years, what do we have to show for it? Here's what we have to show. Out of the almost 440 congressional districts in the United States of America, this is not something statewide, this is nationwide. Out of 440 districts, we are the sixth poorest. The sixth poorest. This is a majority Black district of the same people of whom I'm part of, the Gullah Geechee people, the people who grew the rice, who grew the indigo, the first thing to make the 13 colonies, which would become the United States of America, extremely wealthy. We were kidnapped because of our ability to grow rice in swampy, tropical, subtropical terrain. And now we are in the sixth poorest district overall. But now, for children, it's the third poorest district. So the large majority of Black children that grow up here are growing up in the district that is almost the poorest in the entire country. This is after 30 years. Now, I am a teacher. I've been teaching for 17 years, and I have my data, and my data is phenomenal. In my county, where I was born and raised, a rural, impoverished county that was impoverished when my father grew up here, when his father grew up here, and my great-grandfather and his father, and still impoverished now. And of course, when you have poverty, it correlates with academic challenges. And yet, my kids, in a county where kids tend to just read on grade level or beyond at a 30%, my kids leave my classroom with 75% of them having met the grade level expectations or exceeded. And people ask me, what do I do? Is because I give a damn. But the point I'm making, if I have been a teacher for 30 years and only 6 of my kids did well out of the almost 457,000 that I've taught, because that's the number of people here in this district, no one would defend me. Everyone would say, you are a sorry teacher. You may love what you do, but you need to go.
Facts.
Likewise, after 30 years, it is inexcusable for anyone. I don't care if it's a white Republican or a black Southern Democrat. It is inexcusable that your district is now one of the poorest, almost the poorest district in the country. You signed up for the job and you expected to do the job and do the job well, and you have not. As far as what people can do to help me, I need anyone who is in South Carolina to call this number. And I'm going to do something that I'm not afraid to do. I'm going to give them my number to call, and I do text back. So don't tell them, don't call me and think you're going to get some standard automated message. No, you are going to hear from me. Anyone that lives in South Carolina or has family in South Carolina, I need them to call this number right here. It is 843 940 8983. And those who are in South Carolina, especially my region, they know that area code represents the coastal zone where I am from, where I've lived my entire life, and where my family has been since the 1700s. I need to get as many people to know about my campaign as possible. I don't have the resources of my opponent, who can pretty much flood the airway, which you might very well do, with lies about how good of a representative he's been, when the actual data on paper, I've named 2. There's a whole lot more that's bad about where I live as far as his performance. I'm just going to focus on those 2, that we are nearly the poorest areas out of 440 districts.
Now, can you get
He's
that
going to
phone
flood
number
the
again?
airwave with lies about how good he's been. He's going to flood the airwave with lies about me, because my personality, I call people out, and I may call people names. You know what?
Brother
Get over
Marcel, can you give that phone number again, just for the people,
Yep.
just to catch that?
It is 843 940 8983.
All right, awesome. And then you have a website also?
Yep, my website is marcelforcongress.com. My middle name, Marcel, Marcel, for Congress.com. And on there, I have my entire platform as well.
Okay, and what I mean, what's the inspiration though? I know this is a big deal. You're a teacher, and again, I think just as much as we talk to folks who are in the military, I think we should thank the teachers for your service. So they probably should even let y'all get on the airplane first. You know how they talk about getting on the airplane first? They definitely should take care of the teachers. So God bless you. My patience is bad, so I definitely know I couldn't be a teacher. What has inspired you to go from your everyday life, paying your bills, dealing with the trauma and tribulation that we all experience as people during the pandemic, the COVID, all these things going on? What has inspired you to kind of take this big step to help our people like this?
Well, you mentioned one part of it, me being a teacher and seeing too many of my Black students, my Freedmen students, who were promising, either dead, in jail, or still living in the same poverty that their parents, with whom I went to school with, were living, that their grandparents, with whom my parents went to school in, were living, their great grandparents, seeing that no matter, even the ones that quote unquote did the right thing, went to college, got a degree, seeing that they were still stuck in poverty, seeing that the ones that made it out were being celebrated as an exception, and realizing that's the problem right there, that they are being celebrated as an exception to the rule, but us being successful and making out of poverty should be the rule. I also think about my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was born in 1914 in Beaufort, South Carolina. Her parents died apparently when she was young. Her mother apparently died in childbirth. And seeing how that still happens, how Black American women are still 5 times more likely than white women to die giving birth to a child. The most likely. They're more likely to die here in America, the so-called richest country in the world, than women in developing nations, poorer nations. Seeing how from 1914 to now, we still have those same issues. Seeing how people have owed me money, and it could be an amount like $50, and I want my money back because that's my money. And then I look to say, well, I found my great grandparents who were born in 1815 here in South Carolina. And on their death certificates, their parents were born here in South Carolina. And I keep thinking, wait a minute. So that means they were enslaved probably before America was even America. And South Carolina had one of the most brutal forms of enslavement. The death rate for people who were enslaved in South Carolina was far higher than most other states. And yet, half of America, more than half of America's GDP, the profit that a nation brings in, was brought in by the labor of our ancestors who were enslaved. And yet, when slavery ended, our people only owned 0.5% of the wealth of America because we literally never saw a cent for the labor we did. And then after slavery ended, we were told we was going to get 40 acres and a mule. My family still has land from Special Field Order 15. They had to pay for it. They had to pay for land they cultivated, and that the families, the descendants of the families that enslaved them right now are extremely wealthy, where we, this side of the family, the ones who actually did the work, we are extremely impoverished. And then I looked at the Black Wall Streets. It was over 50 of them. That's what people don't know, that were burnt to the ground. Then I read about how Black women had their children cut out of their wombs. And I see the photos and the postcards of being lynched. And then I realized how today, at the end of slavery, 0.5% of America's wealth. Today, we only own 3% of America's wealth. And how in the 1950s, we owned 15 million acres of property, and today we only own 1 million. And how my people, my generation, own less homes now than my great-grandparents' generation who went through Jim Crow, where it was legal to discriminate against us, and they did. So when I think about the $50 someone owes me, I think, well, if I'm mad about that, and if I can't pay my student loans, or if I can't pay my bill, the phone company calls me, or the electric company calls me and say, hey, when are you going to pay us? If everyone else has the right to get what they're owed, then why do we not have the right to get what we are owed? When I was a kid, my great-grandparents were still alive. They were born in the 1800s. They were still living when I was a kid in the 90s. I literally saw people who were the children of those who were enslaved. My great-grandmother, both my great-grandparents, my great-grandmother lived with me, helped raise me, Justine Brown. I literally spent every single day with her. Her, my mother, and my grandmother helped raise me. She died when I was 31 years old at the age of 101. Her parents were dead, so she was raised by her grandparents, who are my great-great-great-grandparents. My great-great-great-grandfather, Willie Simmons, was enslaved. He was born in 1839 on a plantation, a rice plantation here in Beaufort, South Carolina. And yet he's gone. He died in 1930 of some type of heart disease. I don't pronounce it right, but it's one of the symptoms that they say some of these athletes are getting, myocarditis or something like that. He never saw a dime for what he went through. My great-great-grandparents never got a dime. And when I saw my great-grandmother being put into the ground, that image still haunts me. I now shiver with rage, thinking that she went through so much injustice, Jim Crow, redlining, lynch mobs, heartbreaking poverty. Her sons being given drugs while they were all fighting for this country in the Korean War and Vietnam, because it was believed it would keep them awake and more lucid, because that is what was done to Black soldiers, and came back addicted to drugs. She went through all of this injustice. seeing her granddaughter, my grandmother, who was giving a bad batch of blood in the 1960s during a pregnancy. Again, black woman, medical anti-blackness. And even though I was able to have my grandmother in my life for 9 years, she still left too soon. She was a beautiful woman. Knowing that it was that bad batch of blood that did irreparable damage to her kidneys, to why she had to suffer from dialysis, and she would sometimes pass out, hit her head, and one time she fell, hit her head so hard she knocked one of her tooth out. Knowing that my great-grandmother never saw a dime in compensation for that, that's what motivates me. The fact that the family on the island where my great-great-great-grandparents were enslaved, Fripp Island, knowing that that family is living in lavish wealth while my family literally every day we struggle to keep our head above the water, one paycheck for being out on the street, literally, that's what motivates me to do what I am doing, because I know my situation is not unique. I know a lot of other Black Americans, freedmen, go through the same situation, and I know the Congressional Black Caucus, and James Clyburn is a part of that. They have not failed to represent us. They've chosen not to do it because they've done policies for other groups, but they have not done it for us. And I said, so they won't do, I gonna do.
So how do you see, and I am going to say this thing, and this is, again, part of this is contribute to your brilliance. They used to tell us that, you know, one of the big things was don't run against these guys because these folks, because they got seniority. You know, they would help if they could, but they got all these things in the way. What do you see that we can do different, not just in your race? Because I've heard that there's been more and more Democrats who aren't going to be running for re-election. So you're part of, again, as you're showing, you're trailblazing in this regard, and as you said, it's unfortunate that we got to be trailblazers at this point when there's enough data out there to say that we deserve what is ours. What do you see is the reason why these elected officials have betrayed us, and what can we do to hold ourselves accountable to not allow those things to continue to happen? Of course, part of that, of course, is supporting folks like you who are fighting a good fight and doing it for the right reason. What when you do your analysis of why those people did what they or didn't do what they did or should have done, what do you think is, you know, from your perspective, that analysis, and what can we do to prevent that from happening in the future?
One thing we need to do, you see, I'm not just running on a platform of saying what my opponent has not done in his awful record, which is awful. No matter how many commercials he plays or postcards he sends out brag about how well and how good he's done. I'm not just running on what I am going to do. And a leader is not just what they get done. A leader is also what they fight to get done. A person can usually show grace to a leader who they saw stood up and fought the good fight, even if they weren't quite able to get it done. People usually say, but I saw you fighting for it, but I am going to get it done. But also it's inexcusable to not even try to fight for it to get done. And these so-called Black leaders we have now have not done that. But I'm also running on a platform of calling us out for our complicity. We have given our votes to the Democrats since the 1960s, since the passage of the civil rights legislation. Even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who many people associate with the civil rights legislation, said that he integrated his people into a burning house. Even he realized that the civil rights legislation was inadequate. It was the floor and not the ceiling. Even he realized that what was supposed to be for us ended up being given to quote unquote people of color. It was not people of color on those plantations. It was not people of color being lynched. It was not people of color living in Black Wall Street. Those were Black Americans, the children of the people who built this nation. But yet the Civil Rights Act allowed things like affirmative action, which was supposed to give us a fair opportunity to have access to opportunities that we didn't have previously, now mainly benefits white women, mainly white women. So before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, he spoke about how this country had given grants to European immigrants, even to all these other groups, but had not done a thing for Black Americans to whom they owed the most. And he said we were going to get our check. So I'm going to call us out on the fact that we've given our votes to the Democrats. We are the most loyal Democratic voters, and yet these are our numbers. The average white American family has almost $200,000 in wealth. We are hovering around $24,000. We have the least amount of wealth. We have even lower wealth than people who just literally entered this country a year ago. And we've been in this country since before it was even a nation. We have the lowest amount of, we get paid the least. Black men have the shortest lives. While every other group's income is growing, the group that has the fastest growing income are Hispanics, no matter which race they choose, because they're white on Monday. When they see Black Americans about to get something, they become Black on Thursday. And after they get what they need, after using us, they go back to being white on Saturday. So even Hispanics have the fastest growing income. Our income has actually stagnated. It stayed the same. And yet we keep voting for the Democrats and not demanding that they do for us. So that is where we have failed. Now, I'm running as a Democrat, but I'm running on a platform that every Democrat should have, a platform of Black Americans are the ones who vote for us primarily, so they need to be the ones that we do policies to help benefit.
Awesome. With that being said, just thank you again, Brother Marcel. Keep up the good fight. We definitely appreciate you and you giving out your contact information like a real G, like a real good brother would do, and definitely we appreciate that. And as we always end this, I am because we are, and we are definitely because of Brother Marcel. Thank you so much for your love, brother.
Thank you. Take care.
This is I Love Black People Radio on H.U.R Voices, Sirius XM, channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.